series. My name is Caroline Viola. I'm a campus recruiter based out of our New York office and very excited for you all to join us today. We have a great panel here for this session of our practices for this upcoming season and how to apply. So before we dive in, just a couple logistics here. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, you'll see that there is Slido on the right hand of the screen. You can go ahead and post a question, or if you see a question that you want answered, you can upvote that. And then if you have an anonymous question you want asked, you can send that directly to Jen Yu. She is the host of this event, and we'll go ahead and get those questions answered. In the meantime, if you don't have your question answered, you can go ahead and send that to kearneycareers.mba@kearney.com, and we'll go ahead and get those answered for you in a timely manner. So with that, today's webinar, we have an overview of our application process, as well as the practices and how to choose which practice is best for you as you go through the application. And then we'll have time at the end for Q&A with our panelists. So I'll go ahead and pass it off to our speakers to go ahead and introduce themselves quickly. Nikki, I'll start with you.
Perfect. I'll kick it off. Hi, everyone. I'm Dominique Cathane, or Nikki. I'm an associate out of the Chicago office in the strategic operations practice. So I think we'll go into a little bit more detail on all the practices later.
Hi, everyone. Hey, I'll just go follow the picture order. Hi, everyone. My name is Zoe Weber. I'm an associate out of the New York office in the transactions and transformations practice with a focus on M&A. So you'll hear more as well to come, but excited to be here with everyone.
Everyone, I'm Alex, an associate out of the San Francisco office as a part of our product excellence practice called Pearl, or Pearl Lab.
Hi, everyone. Excited to meet you all. My name is Dipinti, and I'm an associate in the digital transformation practice in our New York office. So looking forward to talk about it and answer all the questions that you may have about the practice.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Asta Bhavsinka. I'm a manager aligned to the SF office, and I'm from the Kearney Analytics practice. Thanks so much for joining. Looking forward to this conversation.
Hey everyone, I'm Trey Sullivan. I'm an associate out of the New York office, and I'm excited to tell everyone about my experience in the general practice.
Great, thank you, everyone. So just a quick overview of our recruiting process and application before we dive into all of the practices that we're hiring for. So our interview process consists of 2 rounds. Our first being 1 case and 1 behavioral interview. They are going to be virtual, and they are both 45 minutes each. And then if you are past the final rounds, those will either be virtual or in one of our Kearney offices, depending where you are. And they will be 2 cases and 1 behavioral interview. So definitely recommend starting to practice your casing if you haven't done so already. And we'll also have a webinar in the next few weeks regarding our interview process, so recommend you sign up for that as well. But as you go through our application, you will be able to pick your top office practice or your top office preference, as well as ranking the 6 practices that we do have. So Kearney has a national staffing model, which means that regardless of whatever office you're in, you can be placed on any project within the Americas, specifically US. So as you're going through, be sure to pick an office that works for you both professionally and personally. You will have the same opportunity project rise no matter where you are. It's really wherever works best for you. So we have a list of our US based offices as well as Toronto. So recommend whichever works best for you. They all have great events planned throughout the summer. And you can also make the switch if you feel that after your summer you receive a full-time offer, you can easily switch to another office, and it's a very easy process. And then as for the practices, you'll be able to go ahead and rank them 1 through 6 based off of what your preferences are. And as you go ahead and base those, our interviewers and our resume screeners and practices will go ahead and take a look at your resume to see what experience you have for those practices, or if you come through the general practice as well. So definitely take a look at all of those as you're going through the application to make sure whatever practice you want to work in, you put that as one of your top preferences. So as we just previously said, we will have 6 practices that are available for this upcoming summer. And you can see the list here. We have moderators from or speakers from each of those practices as well. So we'll go into a little bit more detail of each of the practices, the type of work that they do, and definitely recommend if you have questions, please go ahead and post those in the chat. We can go into more detail during the Q&A at the end. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Asta to talk a little bit about our Kearney Analytics practice.
Great. Thank you, Caroline. All right. So Kearney Analytics, what do we do, right? So we develop and deliver data and analytics solutions across a lot of different areas. Some examples that you see at the screen are operations and supply chain, consumer and growth, analytics strategy and transformation, execution and implementation. So the list is much broader than this, but I want to say that like most of our projects will have something to do with one of these 4 areas, right? In terms of who do we serve, so Kearney Analytics is one of the few practices which is a horizontal practice. So if you think about it, there are industry-specific practices, and then there are horizontal practices that are more industry agnostic, and we work across all industries, right? So our clients can be from health, beauty, food, telco, basically anything, right? So some examples that you see on the page here are we work with the largest power tools manufacturer, where we did some distribution optimization using AI/ML. We work with leading healthcare providers. This is a project where we ran some real-time simulations to figure out how do we care for those non-COVID patients once COVID was waving off, right? The third one is 14 billion plus beauty company project that we did here. We leverage NLP to go over consumer reviews and then help devise a brand strategy for our client. And then the last one is footprint optimization, again, using AI/ML for a fashion retailer. So these are just a few examples, but really to give you a flavor of this, right? I've been at Kearney for 4.5 years, and I think I've done projects across pretty much all industry practices. So there's a lot of optionality in terms of what you want to do. It's more function oriented, so you do a lot of the analytics, a lot of heavy data analytics work, but again, your clients can be across many different industries. On the right, we have I-line because. So what are some top reasons that I chose KA? I think my favorite reason is that you really get to learn a lot of different technology tools, data sets. You get to be on top of that. I have an engineering background and I really like heavy data models. So this practice is a really good way for me to sort of stay in touch with like, okay, how do we cleanse data? How do we how do we get meaningful insights out of using data and solving data that are solving problems that are basically using data-driven approach. We're a global practice, so we have teams basically scattered across all of our different offices around the world, and we have domain, AI, and implementation experts across the globe. So, if there's a project where the client's in a different part of the world, you always have another person that you can sort of reach out and be like, hey, I heard you've done something similar. Can we chat, right? So it's a very close knit. I mean, that's true for all of Kearney, but also for KA. Off late, we've also been doing a lot of AI/ML projects. As you can imagine, clients are very curious with respect to, hey, how do we use Gen AI to solve this problem? Or like, what are other people doing that are from our industry using Gen AI? Can you help us make a POC and things like that? So you really get to experience a lot of that. Even as a BA going up to like associate and above, you get a lot of. I see there are questions coming in. So I'll just finish this and now we can take a look at that. Lastly, I want to say that even though it's a more analytics heavy practice, but there is still a lot of the consulting art and science both happening together, right? So yes, you're solving a lot of problems. Yes, there's a lot of messy data sets that you're sort of figuring out how to use and using all of these different tools. But again, you're also at the same time doing client interviews, you're running workshops, you're creating steerco storylines and all of the other things that you would do as a consultant. So it's a good balance, at least for me, between all of the consulting aspects, but also the data science problem solving aspect. I will then pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for that intro. So for the strategic operations practice, which we call SOP, it's basically divided into 4 pillars. So if you think about SOP, it basically covers the full supply chain from source which is basically sourcing the different materials that a supply chain needs, to making so manufacturing, assessing how the manufacturing floor is laid out, planning planning goes sort of across everything, and then deliver. And SOP also has end to end. So basically, once you're in the practice, you can choose to align to a pillar based on your preferences, or you can work end to end and get a little bit of experience across all of them. Similar to KA, and I think a few of the other practices here, SOP works across industries. So you can work for a retailer, you can work for a consumer products goods company across any of these points of the supply chain. And it's really interesting to see all the unique nuances of these different companies in the same tower. So for example, I work specifically in Deliver, and I like doing network optimization. So we recently did a network optimization for a retail client, which is completely different from the projects that I'm on now, where we're doing a network optimization for a consumer product goods client. So that's something that's very interesting. And something else that I'd call out about SOP is that since supply chain touches a lot of even our other like horizontal practices, I feel like we have the unique opportunity of getting to work with a lot of other practices. So we even work with KA, or we work a lot with industry practices as well, like CHIRP. I'll go into a few examples. So for planning work, this is a good opportunity to partner with KA, for example, where we can build more advanced forecasting mechanisms for companies and help them project their demand. Sourcing is also one of the, we're very, very strong in sourcing. So it's really interesting to be able to work with some of the partners who are at the forefront of the industry in this. So we have a great 7-step methodology that's well known across everywhere. Manufacturing is a great opportunity if you really like being hands-on and going to plant floors and then deliver. Similar to manufacturing, I also really like being hands-on and getting to see distribution centers, but also having the analytics aspect of getting to do a network optimization. So again, similarly, we work across a lot of different industries. So some of our main clients include telecommunications companies. We also have some luxury beauty companies. We work with a lot of consumer goods companies and healthcare. Those, I mean, since I'm biased to Deliver, those are really interesting in the Deliver sector, because a lot of these medicines have really unique things that you need to consider in transportation. But you can read through some of those examples there. And the reason why I chose SOP personally was because it is something that Kearney is at the forefront of the industry for. So you get to work with experts who really know, they have deep knowledge on the topics. And we also have a lot of people who had the opportunity to work in industry. So you have the mix of having industry experience as well as having very deep consulting experience. Then, as we said before, or you get to work across industries and across even horizontal groups. Then the third one here, I think, is a really good point, because in consulting, you do tend to work at a very high level. And in SOP specifically, you get to really see those results. So if you're working for transportation client, you get to see them implement different routes, and you actually see the dollars impact their P&L. So that's really interesting. And if you like working hands-on, I think this is a great practice for you, because you get the opportunity to be in factories or in distribution centers. I mean, I like working in trucking, so I think getting that experience is really unique, and it might not be as much of like a behind a computer job. So yeah, I think that's my high level summary of strategic operations. I also love the practice in general. I think that it's a really close knit community where you have support across all levels and ranks.
All right, tough to follow that one, but I'll try with the TNT practice. So TNT is transactions and transformations, and I tend to start to explain it as our old name, which is PEMA, Private Equity and M&A Practice, because I think it's a little bit more tangible to understand. Of course, also transformations in there as well. So we cover a lot of different parts of the business. It's a very strategic practice. I definitely am. I definitely love it. So I'm going to be a little bit biased here when I'm explaining it, but feel free to ask any questions. So strategic catalysts, we create CEO agendas. So this is where we kind of put our brains together, and we have an analytic tool that we use to scrape the internet and scrape different data resources to create an agenda for CEOs and present it, saying, maybe you haven't thought about X, or maybe you need to expand your horizons a little bit for the next 5-10 years. So that's one part of it. Another large part is the due diligence. So diligences are normally 4 to 6 weeks, and it's pretty fast paced. You're working directly with the private equity client. Usually they're coming to you and saying, should I buy this company? Yes or no. Clearly it's not just going to be Kearney's input that makes the decision for, a extremely large purchase, sometimes over $1 billion. But it's a lot of our data and the work that we put into it to give them another opinion, or for them to take it to their investment committees. And then transformations, which is a lot of value creation. It's very interesting when we go into a client and we're working on a full EBITDA transformation. So really making sure that we're hitting on, all of their different costs and trying to increase their margins. So this can be for any type of company. You can be in telco, you can be in consumer products. So you kind of, these are longer term projects, and you really get to work with every part of the organization, because you can't just work in a tailored specific spot without going into and making an impact to the organization. And then transactions, so this is M&A and divestitures. This is where I focus a lot of my time on, so M&A specifically, but we work with corporate and private equity. I know I got a question from Chris, so I would say I couldn't give you an exact breakdown of percentage of what our corporate versus PE-backed M&As are, but I would say in my experience, it's been probably 60-40 in terms of corporate to PE-backed. It just depends on the client. But yeah, so the M&A is great, divestitures as well. So sometimes when you're working in integration, there's also a separation aspect of it, which is very fun and complicated. We work in all different industries. So, just in my personal experience, I've worked with, a large consumer of, soda company, worked with telco, worked in aerospace, worked with optical lenses, working with the gigantic grocery store right now. So it kind of springs all across the board, which for me is really interesting, and kind of one of the reasons why it's nice to align to it is because it's a bit of a generalist practice in terms of all the different types of client work you're able to do. Yes, you're specific in, whether it's a DD or, M&A or PMO, et cetera. You really get a chance to work across a lot of different companies and a lot of different industries. Also, it's, I mentioned, it's very strategic. It's really fun work. And then culturally wise, I really appreciate the TNT practice. We definitely have a work hard, play hard mentality where we get together when we can, and love to do dinners, love to do trainings. It's really focused on training your people, not just on soft skills, but on hard skills as well. So it's really applicable to, I'm sure, what you're learning in business school. So I'll let anyone ask any questions in the chat, but hope you choose to TNT.
Thank you. So I'll kick us off for Pearl, and I'll preface by saying that I'm also very biased. So I actually hope you join the Pearl practice. But Pearl is, I think the way to think of it is It's our product excellence practice. So Pearl stands for Product Excellence and Renewal Lab. While it's not, a traditional lab, if some of you come from more scientific backgrounds, we have our own space that's separate from the corporate office in Westtown, Chicago, and then a few different studios around the world, Germany, Shanghai, Bangalore, India. But I think the way that I like to think about Pearl Lab is we drive a lot of the impact with our clients by changing some aspect of the product. So I can't think of an example right now. So I think it's safe to say that all of the projects that we work on are with companies that either manufacture, make, or are closely involved with some physical, tangible product. And within these projects and with these clients, there's kind of a number of things that we might be tasked with doing. So a very common exercise is margin enhancement. So looking at these products and trying to think about how they could theoretically be made more cost effectively. Launching a new product, so helping clients with new product development. Design for sustainability, which is increasingly common amongst our projects and is often one element of many in the projects that we run. Simplifying the portfolio, so addressing portfolio complexity or product complexity or supply chain complexity. And then embedding some amount of design centricity. And what that means is helping companies who maybe are in older or more stagnant industry think about how they can embed design thinking and some of the the approaches that we take in our other offerings into kind of the core of their business. So I'll maybe talk about the team and kind of how Pearl Lab is structured. The team itself, we have folks all over the world. So in those different studios that we have in the U.S., India, and in China. But we also are very closely tied with an industrial design firm that Kearney actually recently acquired called Teams. So Teams has been a long partner of Pearl Lab. They're involved in 99% of the projects that we run. So we have teams that we lean on for the more creative aspects of the work that we do, so be it renders or prototyping. We also have our team in Bangalore, which is our technical center of excellence. So we conduct a lot of product should costing and product analysis out of our space in Bangalore. And then we work with a number of other internal and external partners for other things that we're doing. So a great example would be a lot of our projects are in spaces where the perspective of the consumer is incredibly important. So we'll partner with Kearney Analytics to drive some consumer sentiment, and that kind of becomes a part of the project as well. Yeah, and then I think the other thing I'll add on kind of the practice as a whole is similar to the three practices before. Pearl works across industries. So we've worked on everything from satellites to soup cans. It really runs the gamut. We play in every industry. Yeah, I think that makes it a really interesting part of the job. My background is in mechanical engineering, and I've had the pleasure of working on everything from the power tools that you see in this image of our lab in Chicago to nutraceutical products, to fitness equipment, to servers, and now I'm working on a fishing equipment project. So my room is littered at home with fishing reels and rods. So yeah, nevertheless, it's a fun practice. I think everyone on the team loves products and loves getting their hands dirty and rolling up their sleeves to look at the products, and yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Excited for any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for speaking about all the practices. It's the last one, right? DT, but last but not the least, DT is definitely one of the most exciting practices that we have in Kearney. Again, I may be biased, but it's definitely a practice that I'm really excited about. And just to give you guys a background, I interned in the firm last year, so I was a summer associate, and then I returned this year back in July. I did my MBA from Tuck, and then I'm back in the firm. Really, really excited. I was also aligned to DT when I interned. I really, really loved the practice. I loved everything that we do, and that kind of influences my choice to return to the firm and align with the same practice. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of some of the projects that I have been doing with the firm, as well as like overall from a broad perspective, what does DT do? So yes, there's a lot of the slide, but overall, my experience with the DT practice has been working with basically, I have almost worked with large scale transformation projects. So during my summer, I have worked with two big clients in the US. One of them was a large insurance provider, and the second one was one of the biggest telecom companies in the US. And both of these were focused primarily around transformation. So the first one was cost transformation, wherein it's a little bit around strategic IT, where we were trying to negotiate a lot with the IT suppliers that the insurance company had, and we were trying to find out, okay, so they had gone through a divestiture, and what should we do in order to help them negotiate better with the suppliers once they are a different entity. Once that project was done, I shifted gears to the telecom company, wherein I was kind of dealing more with IT transformation. So basically helping them understand the IT landscape and doing a due diligence, for not a typical due diligence, but actually doing a health check on their entire IT landscape and trying to find out which are some of the areas where they could actually optimize costs and improve the IT processes. So some of those areas that I worked in particularly was moving all the apps from on server to cloud, which was a very interesting bit. It helped me gain a lot of knowledge about the entire cloud architecture and how exactly cloud computing works, because I mean, we all have a real good idea about what cloud is, but I think when you work with all these experts who really understand the architecture and the technology stack of it, you get all those insights that you weren't aware of. I mean, yeah, we were aware of it in terms of the technology and the business, but what is really happening when things are shifted to cloud? How exactly is it done? So all of that I got to learn on the project, which was great. Coming to my third project, which is something that I'm wrapping up now, it's actually with one of the largest elevator companies in the US. And once again, it's a transformation project wherein we are dealing with CRM and field transformation for the elevator company. And it was a lot around product development, because again, they are shifting their entire system to a new environment. So it was kind of going through all their capabilities, trying to make some epics and user stories around that, and also negotiating a lot with suppliers. So what digital transformation does, as you might have heard from my array of experiences, so we do a lot of work around digitizing the business model of the firms. We can do a lot of work around digitalizing the supply chain. We can do a lot of work around R&D transformations, and some of it around IT strategy and operations. So inside the DT practice, I'll give you an overview of how things are organized. So we do have something called squads, which we have started recently. So squads are basically smaller groups of people spearheaded by a partner, and will have associates and managers and principals who do research around all these topics. Because when you think of digital transformation, it's a big area. So it can have, say, digital business model. It can have products and platforms. It can have Gen AI. So we needed smaller subgroups of people who would kind of delve deep into these areas, and they would do the research when they are not working on the project. So the partners typically try to find out industry connections based on these sub areas, and they try to find out if we could get some business around that. And the managers and associates and principals, they are also doing some industry research, reading reports, and finding out what exactly is happening in these areas that we can use to enhance our knowledge when we are going for projects and when we are, let's say, helping our clients. So again, one of the hottest topics that we have been exploring, as we do with Kearney Analytics, is Gen AI. So it's a big part of what DT is doing as well. We are trying to build our internal Gen AI capabilities within the firm, as well as we are trying to arm ourselves up with the knowledge so that tomorrow when we go to a client, and because everyone is about, oh, we need Gen AI, but how feasible it is to implement Gen AI in the entire tech stack. What are the kind of diligences you need to perform before you even start thinking about incorporating Gen AI in your product? So that's something that we have been trying to learn a lot. So yes, why I chose this practice, I'll tell you the number one reason was because of my interest towards it. I was in the technology sector before I went for my MBA, and I did a lot of work around product architecture and product management and all of that. And I felt that DT kind of, it brings your technological knowledge or all this kind of skills that you have built in the tech industry, and it arms you well enough with the business aspects of it so that you get a well-rounded consulting toolkit when you want to go forward. So not only are you using your tech knowledge, which you may have in certain areas, but you're also getting armed of what are the business implications of this tech knowledge. Like, what is the business implication if you're shifting to cloud, for example? And you're really getting this amazing toolkit that you can use further in whatever your long-term aspirations may be. So yeah, I think that was all about DT, but I'm happy to take questions about it. Again, we are a horizontal practice. We work with industries.
Hello, I'm going to spend some time talking about the general practice and what it means to be a generalist. So being a generalist essentially means that you have access to work across all sorts of functions and industries. And so you're in a pool of consultants that all of the projects that are sold in our industry and functional practices, they'll be able to staff you on those projects. And so really, I would start by saying, like, if you're not exactly sure what you want to do, if you heard all of these other people speak on behalf of their great practices, and you kind of are interested in all of them, or at least a few of them, and you aren't exactly sure what to do, right? Being a generalist is a really good option because it allows you to explore across the entire firm, and you can kind of gauge what you may be interested in. So just speaking on my own experience, I've been a generalist for 3 years. And in that time, I've got to work, from an industry perspective, I've got to work in health, logistics, automotive, as well as, the auto industry, for example. And from, in terms of the functional work I've got to do, I've done procurement, I've done leadership change, I've worked on strategy projects. So it's been a really great way to expose me to the different types of projects that we do at Kearney. And so it's been a really great experience for me. I think if you're someone who has a better idea of, if one of these other practices gets you really excited, then that's awesome. If you're not quite exactly sure what you want to do, then being a generalist is a really great option because there's no commitment. You don't have to be a generalist for 3 years, right? If you work on a couple of projects, and maybe your third project in is a project in the consumer industry space, and you want to join our chirp practice, you can do that right away, right? So it's really great. And also I will say there's a new program that we have called the Practice Discovery Program, the PDP, which essentially that's like a rotational program where generalists get put into a practice, placed into a practice for a period of time, and then they could rotate. They could either go back into the generalist pool or join that practice if they had a good experience, or temporarily join another practice. And basically it gives you some exposure to what it means to be in a practice without the full commitment of joining. So of course, happy to answer any questions about what it means to be a generalist, or the PDP program, or anything along those lines.
Great. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. So we have a little bit of time left for Q&A. So we'll go through some of these So I'm looking at Slido right now, and I see a few here that I can answer pretty quickly. So the top question right now is, would the case or interview process be different for different practices? Yes and no. So the description of like the amount of cases and behavioral interview you would do, those remain the same regardless of the practice you select. However, you would, if you align to a practice, you would be interviewing with interviewers from said practice, as well as most likely doing a case aligned to the type of work that the practice would do there. But the amount of cases and behavioral interviews you do are the same regardless of the practice. And then the second top question I see here is, do we have to specify our practice of interest, or is there a generalist model? You are more than welcome to apply for the generalist practice and be able to work on all different types of projects like Trey spoke about. So either works, whatever works best for your career. This next question I'm going to ask Nikki to answer. Nikki, can you talk about the technical skill set that is needed to be successful in the SOP practice?
Yeah, I think that although, well, first off, I'd start with that there's people that studied all different types of backgrounds in SOP. I know there are quite a bit of people who have engineering backgrounds. I personally studied industrial, but you don't necessarily need that to join the practice. And I'd say that even at an associate level, you're surrounded by experts. So even if you don't have the technical expertise for a certain project, you'll have partners and managers, principals, partners who can give you the guidance to be successful in that. I think that as long as I wouldn't necessarily think that you need industry experience to be successful in SOP. It's all things that you can learn as long as you go into it with that mindset. And if you do have the industry expertise, well, your ramp up might be a little bit smoother than someone who is starting from scratch.
Great, thank you so much. The next question in the chat is, can you be considered for multiple practices at the same time as you're going through the interview stage? So you can rank your practices, and then you will receive an invite to interview for one said practice. So once you receive your interview, you'll be interviewing solely for that one practice rather than interviewing for multiple throughout the application and interview process as well. Asta, I'm going to ask you this next question. Does Kearney require a significant data analytics background for successful candidates?
Thank you, Caroline. So it's definitely helpful to have some experience with large data sets, whether that's if you've done simulation before, if you have a working knowledge of Python, for example, if you can, code. Not to say that you have to be like a complete data scientist, but if you can get data sets on Python and do some basic regression models and stuff like that, those are definitely helpful skills to have. And then we also do a lot of optimizations. If you have experience with like any of the footprint optimization or any other optimization tools, that is also considered a plus. Those are definitely pluses, especially for the analytics practice.
Great, thank you so much. Zoe and DePinty, I'll ask this to both of you next. But do different practice groups work together on one project, or is there some intersection such as T&T and DT working together when there's like transformations in digital?
Yeah, constantly. So it's pretty rare to have, at least for T&T, to have a strictly T&T project unless you're working on like a small diligence team. I'm constantly working with SOP folks or Chirp or ATI, DT, like really any other practice. So we kind of plug in as like the experts in a certain area and help support, maybe another industry or another practice.
Great, thank you. And then Alex, I'll ask this next one to you. Could you provide a breakdown of the projects in terms of your focus, like specifically what percentage of projects are centered around pre-launch or more development and strategy?
Okay, yeah, and is this specifically with regard to the work at Pearl?
Yes, it says for the Pearl team.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the majority of our projects we're working on mature portfolios, so companies with a the mature set of products in their portfolio, and oftentimes we're looking at products that currently exist on the market, and we're either helping to inform changes that they can make to those products in like an in-season launch, or depending on the life cycle of some of these products, it's, if the life cycle of a product is 2 years, you're probably not going to change the product in that life cycle, so it's informing the new product development. So most often, I guess, to answer that question, we're looking at companies with a number of products that are currently out on the market, and then our scope almost always includes future product launches as well. But it's rare that you're only looking at kind of future products or existing products. It's oftentimes it's a mix. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And then Trey, I'll ask this question to you next. As a generalist, is there a target moment where you should choose a specific practice to specialize in?
Yeah, so I think I would say at Kearney we're looking to have people align a bit sooner than before, maybe, but still, want people to have the opportunity to be a generalist for a while. I would say, like, the best way to describe it is once you become a manager, you're going to be leaned on for your expertise, probably more so than just, your analytical skills, etc. And so naturally, right, it's easier to build that expertise when you're doing more work in the same area. And so typically by the time you're a manager, which is the role that you would go to after a few years an associate, you're going to want to narrow in your focus and join a practice most likely.
Great. Thank you so much. So I know we are coming up to time. So I did just want to share that we have some additional webinars coming up the next few weeks. We have a webinar in 2 weeks that are some Kearney alumni, so you can meet folks that used to work at the practice and have since moved on and share the insights that they've, the skills they've received in the conversations and the network that they've built since being at Kearney and leaving as well. So we have some great relationships with our alumni. And then, like I said earlier, we'll have our interview prep webinar as well in a few weeks, just go over the process of interviewing here at Kearney. So with that, again, if there weren't any questions that you wanted answered, you can reach out to kearneycareers.mba@kearney.com and we'll go ahead and get those answered for you. And with that, I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us this afternoon and providing all the great insight of their practices and experiences. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining as well. We hope you have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.